The drama of a narcissist is a theater with bright lights, loud declarations, and carefully crafted roles. They want you to focus on the performance, the flattery, the accusations, the manipulation, the anger. But if you get caught in the show, you miss the engine that drives it. Behind the stage curtain lies something far more important, the shadow. To understand the fastest way to disarm a narcissist, you must learn to look past the costume and study the raw, unpolished, hidden force that fuels everything. This principle, confront the shadow, not the show, requires courage, insight, and discipline, but it creates a shift that makes you untouchable in ways spectacle never can. The show is always designed for distraction. When a narcissist raises their voice, they're saying, "Look at my power." When they flatter you excessively, they're saying, "Look how special I make you feel." When they twist your words or project their flaws onto you, they're saying, "Look how wrong you are and how right I must be." The stage is vibrant and emotional, pulling you into a reaction. The shadow, however, is silent. It is the reservoir of insecurity, fear of exposure, shame, and deep unhealed wounds they cannot face. The shadow whispers what the show tries to conceal. If you learn to hear the whisper beneath the performance, you will stop being hypnotized by the drama and start seeing the fragile core underneath it. Confronting the shadow does not mean humiliating them with it. It does not mean shouting, "I know you're insecure." That would only provoke more theater. Confronting the shadow means adjusting your own perception first. It means remembering that their loudness masks fear, their control masks weakness, their superiority masks emptiness. When you remind yourself of this truth, you take back the one thing they rely on, your emotional investment in their drama. Without your investment, their tactics lose momentum. The show collapses when the audience refuses to clap. This principle also applies inwardly. Every human being carries a shadow, not just those with narcissistic tendencies. If you are entangled with a manipulator, ask yourself what in you responds so strongly to the performance. Do you feel the need to defend yourself against their accusations? Do you long to win their approval when they dangle praise before you? Do you fear abandonment when they threaten to withdraw? These reactions come from your own unexamined shadow. To confront theirs, you must confront yours. Otherwise, you remain a participant in the script they are writing. Your shadow and theirs will keep playing out the same predictable cycle until one of you decides to step off stage. Confronting the shadow is a discipline of silence and observation. Imagine watching a storm from behind a window. The rain beats hard, the lightning flashes, but you are inside, safe and unmoved. The storm is their show. The window is your awareness. When you choose not to step outside and get soaked, you demonstrate a power they cannot access. This unnerves them because the show only works if you stand in the rain and scream back at the sky. Once you stop giving the weather control over your inner state, you see the storm for what it is: temporary, noisy, and powerless against the shelter you had built. There is also a psychological power in refusing to fight on the stage they create. The narcissist expects a confrontation on their terms, loud words, emotional exchanges, a battle for dominance. But if you shift the terrain to the shadow, meaning you focus on the truth beneath appearances, the rules change. When they accuse, you ask calm questions. When they inflate, you remain neutral. When they rage, you breathe slowly and wait. When they bait, you do not bite. Each of these acts is a confrontation not of the actor on the stage, but of the unspoken fear behind the act. They feel this difference even if they cannot name it. It terrifies them because it exposes their weakness without you ever saying a word. To truly apply this, one must separate person from projection. The show is projection. They assign roles to you, such as victim, admirer, rival, or servant. If you play along, the projection becomes your reality. But the shadow is what they fear others will see, the emptiness behind the mask. Confronting the shadow means refusing to play the role, refusing to live inside the projection. You answer as yourself, not as the character they try to script for you. This act of self-possession is deeply unsettling to someone who survives by writing other people's parts. Your refusal to act in their play is the quietest and strongest confrontation possible. The mistake most people make is trying to beat the narcissist at their own game, trying to out-argue, out-dazzle, or outplay them in the theater. But the show is their territory. They have rehearsed every scene. You will always lose if you stay on stage. But the shadow, that is the one space they cannot inhabit consciously. They avoid it, deny it, bury it if you direct your awareness there, not by attacking, but by refusing to be swayed. You are standing in the one place they cannot stand. That difference alone shifts the power dynamic forever. This approach requires patience. There is no instant applause, no immediate visible victory. In fact, the narcissist may escalate their performance at first, desperate to lure you back into the theater. But your persistence creates a pattern. Every attempt to provoke you ends in silence, neutrality, or calm consequence. Over time, they realize the show no longer works. And once the show doesn't work, they are left alone with their shadow, the very thing they fear most thus. The fastest way to stop being controlled by a narcissist is not to fight louder, not to play smarter, but to see deeper. To confront the shadow, not the show, is to recognize the true source of their behavior and to refuse the invitation to participate in their staged reality. This is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of clarity. It is choosing to stand outside the theater, to watch without reacting, and to let the performance end on its own when no one remains in the audience. The word power is often misunderstood. Many think of it as domination, as the ability to control others, to bend circumstances to one's will, or to win in conflicts of ego. But real power does not begin in the outer world. It begins within, in the process of becoming whole. Individuation, the journey of uniting the fragments of the self into a coherent, authentic being, is the deepest source of power a person can ever discover. This is the power that cannot be stolen, manipulated, or diminished by another's games. It is power that lives in stillness, grows in awareness, and radiates in presence. Individuation is the gradual unfolding of the true self from beneath the masks of conditioning, fear, and expectation. Each person grows up wearing roles handed to them: child, student, worker, partner. Each of these roles can be valuable, but they are not the entirety of who you are. When life becomes only a performance of these masks, you remain vulnerable to the judgment, manipulation, or approval of others. Your identity shifts with the winds of external validation. But when you begin the work of individuation, you peel back those masks and discover the inner ground that is not dependent on applause or acceptance. That inner ground is where authentic power lives. A narcissist, for example, thrives on people who have not individuated. If you are still tied to the need for constant approval, you can be easily flattered. If you are still governed by fear of rejection, you can be easily controlled. If you have not claimed your shadow, you can be easily shamed. But the individuated person stands differently. They know their worth is not up for debating. They have faced their shadow enough to hold it without denial. They understand their uniqueness and their common humanity at once. Such a person is no longer a pawn on another's chessboard. This is why individuation is power. It breaks the chains of external control and establishes sovereignty over one's own life. The process itself is not easy. It requires looking at the contradictions within you, the part that wants safety and the part that craves freedom, the part that longs to be loved and the part that fears intimacy, the part that seeks achievement and the part that resents pressure. These tensions are not problems to erase, they are materials to integrate. Individuation means holding opposites without collapsing into either extreme. It means allowing complexity to coexist inside you without splitting off what feels inconvenient. In doing this, you stop being at war with yourself and you stop being so easily divided by others. An integrated self cannot be manipulated into self-betrayal as easily as a fragmented one. Consider how many conflicts with narcissistic personalities are battles of reflection. They project insecurity onto you, and if you have not met your own insecurity, you react defensively, playing into their hands. They project guilt, and if you secretly carry unexamined guilt, you collapse beneath the weight of their accusation. But individuation teaches you to recognize what is yours and what is not. You own your real flaws without shame, and you reject projections that are not aligned with truth. This clear separation of self from other is a profound act of power. It means you are no longer available as a screen for their inner turmoil. Individuation also redefines success. Instead of chasing endless external markers, status, admiration, material proof, you begin to measure success by alignment with your own values and depth of inner peace. This shift makes you far less vulnerable to manipulation. A person who measures their worth by the applause of others can be easily controlled by withholding or granting attention. But a person who measures their worth by authenticity cannot be bribed with flattery or crushed by rejection. The narcissist's entire economy collapses in the presence of an individuated being because their currency, attention, validation, emotional reaction has no value to someone who has already cashed out of the system. The journey of individuation is also the journey of embracing the unconscious. Much of who we are lives beneath the surface impulses, fears, dreams, forgotten memories. If you refuse to look at these, they control you from the dark. You become reactive, defensive, and driven by forces you do not understand. When you begin to integrate these aspects consciously, they lose their hidden power. You stop being ambushed by your own unresolved wounds. This stability unnerves manipulators because they cannot provoke storms in someone who has already befriended their inner weather. Individuation fosters solitude as well, not loneliness, but the capacity to be alone without despair. This is critical power. A person who cannot stand solitude will cling to toxic company, tolerate abuse, or compromise integrity just to avoid abandonment. But a person who finds richness in solitude chooses relationships from strength rather than fear. They can walk away when necessary. They can endure silence without chasing noise. This independence is terrifying to those who seek to control through attachment, because it means you cannot be cornered by the threat of isolation. Another dimension of individuation is creativity. When you integrate the fragments of your being, you unleash energy that was previously locked in repression and conflict. This energy expresses itself through art, innovation, leadership, problem solving. Creativity born of wholeness is not just personal. It radiates outward, influencing communities and environments. Such power is generative rather than destructive. It does not dominate others, but it changes the space so profoundly that domination becomes irrelevant. To individuate is to become a source of influence that does not rely on coercion, but on the natural authority of authenticity. Ultimately, individuation is not a destination, but a lifelong movement toward wholeness. Each challenge, relationship, or failure becomes an opportunity to discover a hidden fragment of the self and bring it into integration. With each integration, your power deepens. Not because you can now control others, but because you no longer need to. Freedom from the compulsion to control is the highest form of strength. When you carry that freedom, those who depend on control feel powerless in your presence. This is why individuation is power. It creates an inner sovereignty that no one else can rewrite or remove. Human beings are natural projectors. The psyche, often overwhelmed by what it cannot accept or understand within itself, casts those qualities outward onto others. This is not inherently malicious. It is a mechanism of the mind, a way of coping with what is disowned. But projection becomes dangerous when it is used unconsciously as a tool of manipulation, as with the narcissist who crafts illusions to bend others to their will. To deal with such projection, one must learn a delicate art, smash the illusion, but keep the mirror. Destroy the false story being thrown upon you, but keep the reflection as an opportunity to learn what it reveals. Both about the other and about yourself, the illusion is the fabricated image. A narcissist may project their insecurities onto you, calling you inadequate, selfish, or untrustworthy. They may accuse you of the very flaws they fear in themselves. This illusion is not truth. It is camouflage, a way to externalize their inner conflict so they never have to face it. If you accept the illusion, you begin to fight battles that are not yours, defending against accusations that are not grounded in reality. This is how you get pulled into their performance. Smashing the illusion means refusing to wear the costume they hand you. It means saying, internally or out loud, that is not mine to carry. It is the act of discarding the story projected onto you before it hardens into a false identity, but the mirror must be kept. Projection, while deceptive, still reveals something. When someone projects rage, you learn what they are afraid to admit within themselves. When they project envy, you glimpse what they secretly desire. When they project superiority, you see the shadow of their hidden inferiority. This is the mirror. Their projections reflect not your truth, but their truth. If you remain observant, you can see past the illusion to the underlying reality. That clarity is power because it gives you knowledge of their unspoken vulnerabilities. Rather than getting lost in defending yourself against the illusion, you can study the projection as data, as evidence of what they carry in their shadow. At the same time, projection also reflects parts of your own psyche. If their accusation stings, if their insult lingers, ask yourself why. Does the illusion press against an insecurity you secretly hold about yourself? Does it activate guilt, shame, or fear that already existed within you? This is the second dimension of the mirror, the way it illuminates your own hidden material. Smashing the illusion does not mean denying every possibility of truth. It means refusing to accept it blindly. Keeping the mirror means reflecting, investigating, and integrating whatever resonates within you, so that you are less vulnerable next time. This dual use of projection requires discipline. The natural reaction when falsely accused is to defend, argue, or counterattack. But that response gives power to the illusion. It keeps you trapped in the script they are writing. To smash the illusion, you must develop neutrality. Calmness is the hammer. Silence, when well placed, is sharper than denial. Instead of trying to prove yourself innocent on their stage, you let the illusion fall flat. You refuse the invitation to play the character they have assigned you. At the same time, you turn inward to keep the mirror, asking, what does this reveal about them? What does this stir within me? What growth can I draw from this encounter? A projection thrives in unconsciousness. Most people are unaware when they are projecting. They feel the accusation sincerely, as if the problem truly belongs to someone else. A narcissist, however, makes projection into an art form, using it to destabilize others and maintain control. The more unconscious you are, the easier you are to destabilize. But the more conscious you become, the more projection becomes a tool for insight instead of a trap. This is why smashing the illusion is essential. It prevents the lie from taking root. And keeping the mirror is equally essential. It prevents you from wasting the encounter by ignoring the lesson hidden inside the lie. There is also a subtle strength in refusing projection gracefully. If someone says, you're selfish, and you respond with calm curiosity instead of defensiveness, the illusion weakens. You might say, that's interesting. What makes you feel that way? Or even remain silent, letting the accusation hang in the air without validation. This does not mean you accept the insult. It means you do not feed it. You have smashed the illusion by not letting it define you, while keeping the mirror by observing the insecurity that made them project in the first place. This balance of clarity and detachment creates a quiet authority that manipulators find unnerving. Projection also reveals collective truths. In families, groups, or societies, projections often become shared illusions. One person becomes the scapegoat, carrying the shadow of the whole. To smash the illusion here is to refuse to play that role, to return responsibility to its rightful owners. To keep the mirror is to study what the group has disowned and why. In this way, projection can become a guide for collective healing as well as individual growth. Every illusion shattered brings the possibility of seeing more clearly what has been suppressed or denied. To practice this principle daily, one must cultivate awareness. Notice when you feel accused, blamed, or labeled. Pause before reacting. Ask, is this mine, or is this a projection? If it is not yours, smash the illusion by declining to internalize it. Then keep the mirror by reflecting on what it reveals about the projector and what it stirs in you. This habit transforms projection from a battlefield into a classroom. Instead of being wounded by false images, you grow wiser through them. You turn manipulation into revelation, confusion into clarity. In this sense, projection is not only a weapon used against you, it is also a doorway into deeper perception. It teaches you about human nature, about the struggles hidden beneath appearances, about the unspoken fears that drive behavior. To smash the illusion is to refuse the chains of false identity. To keep the mirror is to claim the wisdom hidden inside distortion. This is not only a strategy for dealing with narcissists, it is a practice for navigating all human relationships with greater depth, resilience, and awareness. Boundaries are often misunderstood as acts of rejection or punishment. People fear that by setting limits, they are pushing others away or acting out of cruelty. Yet boundaries are not weapons, nor are they walls built to wound. Boundaries are architecture. They are the structures that allow a life to stand upright, a relationship to remain balanced, and an individual to remain whole. Without architecture, a house collapses into rubble. Without boundaries, a self collapses into confusion and exploitation. To set boundaries is not to punish, but to design, to shape the conditions in which both self and others can thrive. Without chaos, architecture exists to hold space. A room becomes livable only because walls define it. A door allows entry and exit, but it also defines when the space is private. Windows allow light in, but still protect from storm and intrusion. Boundaries function in precisely this way. They define where you end and another begins. They clarify what behaviors are welcome, what energies are allowed, what respect is required. When boundaries are absent, confusion reigns. Others walk through you as though no structure existed. You feel invaded, unsteady, as if your life has no floor. Boundaries restore that ground. They make the invisible visible. Here I am, here you are, here is how we can exist together without collapse. When boundaries are misinterpreted as punishment, resentment follows. People conditioned to believe that love equals limitless availability often see boundaries as withdrawal of affection. A child told that no means rejection may grow into an adult who feels hurt when someone asserts a limit. A narcissist, in particular, interprets boundaries as defiance because their sense of entitlement cannot tolerate restrictions. But the truth is, boundaries are not an act of war, they are an act of design. They say, this is the structure in which I can remain myself while staying in connection with you. Without this structure, the relationship decays into resentment, imbalance, or exploitation. The difference between punishment and architecture lies in intention. Punishment seeks to harm, to inflict consequence as a form of control. Architecture seeks to sustain, to provide order so that life can flourish. When you set a boundary calmly, without cruelty, you are not saying, I wish you harm. You are saying, here is how we can live without destroying each other. You are defining the conditions for mutual respect. This is why boundaries are acts of responsibility, not retaliation. They are how you care for yourself and, paradoxically, how you protect the possibility of relationship itself. Consider the absence of boundaries in a house. If there are no walls between rooms, noise spills everywhere, privacy disappears, and people begin to resent each other's presence. But if the house is well designed with clear divisions and open passageways, the same people can live together harmoniously. In human relationships, the same principle applies. Without boundaries, intimacy becomes suffocation, generosity becomes depletion, love becomes control. With boundaries, intimacy becomes chosen, generosity becomes sustainable, love becomes respectful. The architecture transforms the quality of life for everyone inside it. Setting boundaries requires clarity. You cannot design architecture without knowing what kind of house you want to live in. Many people struggle with boundaries because they have not defined their own values, needs, and limits. They say yes out of guilt, they allow intrusion out of fear, they collapse their structure because they do not trust it to hold. To build boundaries, you must first understand your blueprint, what principles shape your life, what behaviors nurture you, what conditions drain you. This self-knowledge becomes the foundation. Without it, boundaries become either too rigid, fortresses that isolate, or too soft, curtains that offer no protection. Balanced boundaries are strong but flexible, firm but humane. The enforcement of boundaries is another crucial element of architecture. A door is only useful if it can be closed as well as opened. A wall is only useful if it remains standing when pressure is applied. Boundaries lose meaning if they are announced but never upheld. Consistency is key. When a limit is crossed, the consequence must follow calmly and predictably. This is not punishment, but structural integrity. If someone repeatedly enters without knocking, you lock the door, not to harm them, but to reinforce the design. When others see that your architecture holds, they adapt to it, just as people adapt to the walls and doors of a real house. They learn respect because the structure makes respect unavoidable. Boundaries also create beauty. Architecture is not only functional, but aesthetic. A well-designed building uplifts the spirit, inspires creativity, and provides comfort. Similarly, well-designed boundaries create relationships that feel balanced, respectful, and nourishing. When you know where you end and another begins, you can meet them freely without fear of being consumed. You can give without resentment and receive without guilt. The relationship becomes art, not struggle. This is the beauty of boundaries. They make connection sustainable by ensuring that neither self is erased in the process. It is important to recognize that not everyone will welcome your architecture. Those who benefited from your lack of structure may resist when you begin to build. They may accuse you of being selfish, cold, or punishing, but this is projection. They mistake the loss of unearned access for cruelty. In truth, what feels like loss to them is gain for you, and in time, gain for the relationship itself, if they are capable of respecting the new design. If they are not, the boundary will naturally distance you from those who cannot exist without violating your structure. This too is part of architecture. Some doors are meant to remain closed. Boundaries are architecture, not punishment, because they are about building, not breaking. They construct safety, they define space, they create conditions in which love can breathe instead of suffocate. To live without boundaries is to live in a house that caves in at the slightest pressure. To build boundaries is to design a life with strong foundations, clear walls, and open doors that you control. In this architecture, you do not harm others. You invite them into a space where both your dignity and theirs can stand. There are two realms every individual must learn to navigate: the realm of the public, where words and actions are witnessed, judged, and interpreted, and the realm of the private, where convictions are formed, guarded, and lived in silence. Power emerges not from choosing one over the other, but from balancing both. A public truth is the clarity you stand by in the open. Private sureness is the inner conviction that needs no validation to remain steady. Together they form a shield. One protects you from external distortion, the other protects you from internal doubt. Public truth matters because without it, falsehood takes root. Lies grow in silence. When manipulators twist narratives or narcissists spread their illusions, the absence of public truth leaves you vulnerable to their story, becoming the only story. Public truth is not about oversharing your inner life. It is about aligning your outward stance with reality so that others cannot easily override your experience. When you speak truth publicly, you draw boundaries in the collective space. You declare, this is what happened, this is what I stand for, this is what I will not allow. In doing so, you place a stake in the ground that others must reckon with. Silence in such moments becomes a gift to deception. Truth, when spoken, becomes architecture that others cannot ignore, yet public truth without private sureness is fragile. If you declare something in the open, but do not believe it deeply within, you will collapse under pressure. Manipulators are skilled at poking holes in half-formed convictions. They will twist your words, appeal to your insecurities, and make you question yourself. That is why private sureness is essential. It is the quiet knowing that lives beneath the noise of argument. It is the voice inside that says, I know what I saw, I know what I felt, I know what I stand for. This voice does not need an audience. It does not need applause. It does not even need agreement. It is the foundation on which public truth rests, the inner fortress that cannot be stormed by doubt. Private sureness is cultivated through reflection, self-examination, and acceptance of reality as you experienced it. It grows when you stop gaslighting yourself, when you stop asking whether your perception is valid just because someone else refuses to acknowledge it. It strengthens when you write down your truth, when you sit with it in silence, when you repeat it to yourself until it feels undeniable. Private sureness is not arrogance, it is integrity. It is not stubbornness, it is alignment. It is the refusal to abandon your own experience simply because someone else finds it inconvenient. Without this sureness, public truth becomes brittle, and any challenge from outside can shatter it. At the same time, private sureness without public truth can become isolation. You may know what is real, but if you never speak it, the world is left to believe whatever illusions are louder. In toxic relationships, this silence is what enables abuse to spread. A narcissist can distort reality if no one dares to contradict them openly. This is why speaking truth publicly is an act of courage. It is not about seeking validation, but about refusing to let lies dominate the shared space. Public truth creates accountability. It says to the manipulator, your version of reality will not go unchallenged. It says to the community, here is the evidence, here is the witness, here is the alternative to the lie. When public truth and private sureness align, the effect is profound. Your words carry weight because they are backed by conviction. Your silence carries power because it is chosen, not forced. Others sense the difference between someone who argues from insecurity and someone who speaks from sureness. The latter does not need to shout because their steadiness is itself a form of authority. This is the kind of presence that unsettles manipulators most. They thrive on doubt, but when faced with a person whose truth is both publicly affirmed and privately secure, they encounter a wall they cannot move. This balance also protects you from two common traps: overexposure and concealment. Overexposure happens when you reveal too much publicly in search of validation. You scatter your private self across a stage where it can be mocked, misused, or denied. Concealment happens when you hide everything, retreating into silence that allows falsehoods to flourish. The middle path is to decide carefully what must be spoken aloud and what must remain within. Public truth is about the facts, the boundaries, the declarations that sustain justice and prevent deception. Private sureness is about the feelings, The convictions, the unshakable knowledge that sustains dignity and prevents collapse. One way to practice this is to create layers of communication. At the core is private sureness, the non-negotiable truths you hold inside. Around that is the selective circle of trusted people with whom you share more openly. Beyond that lies the realm of public truth, where you speak only what is necessary to maintain clarity, justice, and accountability. This layered approach prevents manipulation. You do not hand over your inner life to those who would weaponize it, but you also do not abandon the shared space to lies. You reveal strategically, you protect deliberately, and you remain aligned throughout. Public truth is also supported by evidence. Documentation, witnesses, and consistency give weight to your words. Manipulators rely on chaos and contradiction to confuse others, but when your public truth is backed by clear patterns and steady testimony, their performance collapses. At the same time, private sureness does not depend on evidence. It is the inner record that requires no external validation. Together they form a double defense. Public truth shields you in society. Private sureness shields you in solitude. This balance extends beyond toxic relationships into every dimension of life. Leaders who have public truth but no private sureness crumble when challenged. Leaders who have private sureness but no public truth become invisible, their convictions unheard. Artists, thinkers, and healers who balance both transform communities because their words are rooted in authenticity and their silence is rooted in certainty. The interplay between public and private is not opposition but partnership, each sustaining the other. To live with public truth and private sureness is to live with integrity. You become someone who cannot be easily silenced and cannot be easily swayed. Lies may circulate, accusations may rise, but your architecture holds. In public, you speak enough to prevent distortion. In private, you know enough to prevent collapse. This balance is what frees you from the endless theater of manipulation, from the hunger for validation, and from the fear of disbelief. It is not about proving yourself to others. It is about proving to yourself that you no longer need to